Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today we're going to talk about something that was regularly keeping me up at night in a pit of existential dread up until I researched it for this video, and that's AI-generated art. But to explain to you why it's been fueling my insomnia, and that of many others so relentlessly, there are like a million things I have to explain to you first. So throughout the video, I'll be going over all of the following 4 sections. What AI art is, whether or not it's real art, why artists are freaking out about it, and whether or not it's actually anything to freak out about at all. Naturally, let's start with AI art. What actually is it? AI-generated art is, simply put, exactly what it sounds like. Art, although it being called that is a point of contention in and of itself, that's generated by an artificial intelligence. On a more technical level, in terms of how it's actually made, my knowledge is quite limited, which is partially because there just isn't one way. There are many apps and programs out there now that do the same thing in different ways, and all of them fall under the same umbrella of AI-generated art. But from what I have learned, in most cases, these services use 2 artificial neural networks that play off of each other to generate an image that is as true as possible to the prompt that the human using it inputs. Or generative adversarial network, an algorithm developed by researchers from Rutgers University, Facebook AI Research, and College of Charleston, is comprised of 2 parts: the generator and the discriminator. The generator creates the image based on the prompt, and the discriminator tries to determine whether or not the image is real or fake, based on the aesthetics that it has been trained on using a database of over 81,500 paintings. To my understanding, they bounce back and forth until the discriminator can no longer tell if the image that the generator creates is real or fake, at which point it delivers you what it believes is a realistic piece of art based on your prompt. I believe different apps use different networks, which is why the pieces that they create can yield such different results, but the basic process of how AI art is created is largely the same. While I haven't used many of these tools myself because the vast majority are either not free or have a waitlist, I did try out Night Cafe on PC and Wamba on iPhone, both for this video and out of personal curiosity. Both allow you to not just input a text prompt for the AI to use, but to also pick an art style for it to depict that prompt in. I spent quite a while messing around with the different ones they had available, and am personally quite partial to Blacklight and Ghibli on Wamba and oil painting on Night Cafe. For your guys' reference, here are some examples of the pieces that they both made with the prompt Abandoned Mall, which I picked because of a project that I'm working on that I was seeking inspiration for. As you can see, it's pretty fucking cool. And while many aspects, especially on the Wamba piece, don't make any technical, realistic sense, both do very clearly read as abandoned malls. Another interesting thing was that on Night Cafe, they let you choose the algorithm that it uses for generation, either creative or coherent. Artistic is better at creating beautiful textures, and coherent is better at composing the image. Wamba doesn't have this, which I imagine is partially to blame for why the pieces I've generated on it are a lot less compositionally sound. Once again, for your reference, here is that same prompt rendered in both algorithms. As you can see, the one generated through the coherent algorithm is, indeed, much more coherent. Another option Night Cafe offers that Wamba does not is the opportunity to evolve your image. You take the original image that it just generated for you and add a second prompt to it, be that another text prompt or another style modifier. In this case, I changed Abandoned Mall to Overgrown Abandoned Mall, and added neon and synthwave to the styles. And because I used the image created with the coherent algorithm, I did that for the evolution too. This is what it made. And I gotta say, the way it maintained the composition and the values of the original piece while adding the exact elements that I wanted to see was unbelievably impressive to me, and if Night Cafe weren't a paid service beyond the first 5 free credits, I would be sold on using it to thumbnail all of the base environment concepts for my secret project that I can't talk about but keep kind of talking about, sorry. I'm still kind of tempted to look into their pricing options, honestly, but that's a tangent to go off on in another video, because if I do decide to try to implement that into the creation process, I think it would be kind of cool to let you guys know how it goes. Anyway, now that I've kind of half-assed explained what AI art is, let's get into one of the most hotly debated questions in the art community right now, especially the fine art community. Is AI art real art? Now, in fairness, what is and isn't real art is a topic that's been debated to death every time the art community is given a new tool and decides to police whether or not the use of that tool is offensive to their delicate artist sensibilities. We saw it with digital art being criticized for the use of computer-based tools, brushes, and editing features, and subsequently demeaned as not real art. We saw it with artists being called out for using 3D models to improve the anatomy in their pieces. We saw it with photo bashing, and even with manga artists and comic artists being shit on for openly and transparently tracing over stock backgrounds to save themselves production time. The art community is no stranger to gatekeeping in terms of what is and isn't real art. And there will always be purists looking to redefine the term to inflate their own egos and deflate other subgroups of artists' egos in the process. And for some, that's what this debate comes down to. Less about the art itself, and more about the amount of effort that goes into it. Sitting down and letting Night Cafe make me environment renders that could easily be used for something professional does not make me an artist. And yet many people are using these tools and claiming themselves to be artists for that alone. Not to mention selling those pieces, sometimes as NFTs, displaying them in galleries, and growing entire followings based on that. And in that case, I don't think there's much debate to be had at all. Using an AI art generator to make art does not make you an artist. But it becomes more complicated and nuanced when it comes to people using AI-generated art for their own art as a tool, which is both viable and very, very lucrative as a concept right now. See, AI art rarely, if ever, creates a finished piece. It also almost exclusively creates quite low-resolution images. So for a lot of artists, using these apps and services isn't done with the intention of getting those images and calling it a day, but rather using those images for their own work. Let me give you 5 examples. First, an artist wants to draw a character in a neon alleyway covered in graffiti. They know what character they want to draw and how they want to draw them, and they can see the vague outline of how they want the piece to look in their heads, but they don't have much more than that. They put neon alleyway into an AI art generator, and now they have 10 thumbnails that they can use almost like customized references. Now they know what color palette they want to use. They have a good grasp on the composition they're going for, and the generator was likely able to create some good abstract graffiti for them to draw inspiration from, whereas before, all they knew was that they wanted there to be some kind of graffiti somewhere. 2, an artist is designing an alien species for a character concept art. The human mind is fairly limited in terms of what it can imagine as features for an alien that aren't based on already existing species that it's seen. But an AI, it's got tens of thousands of pieces of art to consult, and no concept of what is realistic or not to limit what it creates based on them. That concept artist probably got 15 completely nonsensical pieces of AI art when they gave it the prompt alien with whatever adjectives they found pertinent, and none of them would work on their own. But now their concept art has a vastly more diverse pool of individual character features to draw from that might never have occurred to them before. 3, an artist knows what they want to draw, but they don't know how they want the composition of a piece to look. They type the gist of what they want to draw into an AI art generator, and now they have a litany of possible compositional concepts to draw inspiration from. 4, an artist loves the Ghibli style of art, but it's nothing like they've ever painted before. They generate a piece of AI art in that style, based on a prompt that they want to draw, and now they have kind of a baseline image of how that would look in that style, so they can effectively scale it up, draw over it or edit it, and learn to draw that kind of a style with a direct and personalized reference as to how their idea would look in it. They don't want to claim this art to be completely their own, and they don't intend to post it or hide that it was done with the help of AI art, they just want to use it for this study. 5, an artist sucks at backgrounds and finds no joy in creating them. They're not a professional, they aren't selling this work, and they're not studying to improve, but they just happen to enjoy drawing characters and not backgrounds. With AI-generated art, they're able to create a background for the character they've already drawn, and now they don't have to draw the background that they wanted themselves. They don't claim to have created the background, but they are now able to post a finished piece that conveys the idea they had in their heads without having to slave over a background they would have hated making and held no value to them to create. These are just a handful of ways that AI-generated art could phenomenally improve the lives of artists if used as a tool, and they're also just a handful of ways that other artists could claim they're cheating by doing so. If it's a question of whether or not AI-generated art is real art when used by artists to create their pieces, I think it's something that's going to spark quite a bit of controversy going forwards, especially as that particular use grows in popularity. Personally, I think that as long as the artist is honest and doesn't claim AI art as their own, it's just another tool that artists can use to learn, grow, and save time, and that shouldn't be demonized. But that's just me. It's obviously a more complex issue the more you dive into it, and I'd actually be really interested to hear what you guys think about it, because I'm still a little conflicted myself. But whether or not AI art, as used by artists to create their own art, is real art, is not actually the most contentious issue here. What has most people understandably up in arms about this is the question of whether AI itself is able to create real art. I'm not talking about people claiming themselves to be artists because they made AI-generated art, or people using AI-generated art to make their own work. I'm talking about the AI art itself, with no human artist involved. Is what these algorithms create art? That's something that the art community has been arguing about for months now, and while there's no concrete answer that I can give you, as it's really just a matter of opinion, I can at least explain both sides to you and give you my take on it. Most people don't believe that AI-generated art should be considered real art, because of one fundamental rule. Art cannot be defined by anything other than creativity. If a painting of a blue square is just as artistically valid as the Mona Lisa, we must acknowledge acknowledge that art itself can't be defined by any visually quantifiable parameters. The only thing they both have in common, though, is that they were both an artist's interpretation of subject matter. Subsequently, it's not a huge leap to then posit that while creativity itself cannot be defined, we could at least tentatively summarize it as an artist's ability to interpret their intentions, views, stories, or feelings into a medium. But AI doesn't do that. This isn't an AI that's designed to think like a human creating these pieces, which, for the record, lambda scare aside, I do not believe currently exists yet. It's two neural networks completing pre-designated tasks and subsequently creating an image. It doesn't have an idea or a concept or even a desire to create, because it is not currently capable of that. It requires a human to give it that idea, and even then, it's not creating anything based on what it imagines that prompt to be associated with. It's consulting a database of already made art by humans to combine into one image. So if we're agreeing that creativity can at least be defined by the intent to communicate a thought or concept, and we're also agreeing that an AI itself is not creating or visualizing a concept, we also have to accept, based on this argument, that AI is not capable of creativity. And if the only agreed upon definition of art is that it demonstrates creativity, then that means that an artificial intelligence cannot, without human input, create real art. Others, however, argue that the definition of creativity is too rigid, even based on those parameters. One article, linked amongst other sources in the description, likens AI art to the birth of modern art, Marcel Duchamp, the dude who put a urinal in an art gallery and called it art. As the article puts it, Duchamp's ready-made pieces brought these objects to view in a new way, and it caused audiences to ask new questions, such as, is this even art? What am I looking at? What did the artist actually do here? What is a work of art anyway? And should we not restrict the definition a bit? The article then goes on to assert that in the author's opinion, we shouldn't be restricting the definition of art, we should be expanding it. They say the following: art doesn't even need to have a physical form. It can be completely immaterial. What matters is the decisions the artist makes, how the public interacts with it, and what it means to the community and culture from which it springs. In AI-generated art, it might seem like the computer is making all the decisions. It may be that the artist doesn't understand everything the algorithm is doing. But nothing at all will happen without input from someone. That's the point where you'll find the art. When a person calculates how to weight their ML models, or makes decisions about training data, or makes any other choices about how to initiate the process. They continue a bit more about that concept in the article, so I encourage you to read it yourselves. But while I acknowledge that what they're saying is correct, I also disagree with it in its own context. What I mean is that the author used that argument to claim that AI-generated art is real on a philosophical level because of the human involvement in its creation, and that's precisely why I believe this argument is faulty. If the only way in which AI-generated art can be considered real art in and of itself is the way in which it was created to do so by a human and the human input required to make it, then the AI art itself is not art. Instead, I would personally posit that that would mean that the algorithm itself, as created by one human or a team of humans, is the art, and everything created using it is simply artistically passing output. Others make what I consider to be a more compelling argument, that because AI art is not constrained by the same rules and conventions of human-created art, and is subsequently not inherently created to please either the viewer or the creator, it can therefore actually be more creative and original than human-created art. I personally find this intellectually fascinating as a concept, but also impossible to quantify like most of these concepts. And on a fundamental level, while I do see where people with this stance are coming from, it still kind of comes down to the same bottom line for me. While the results of the automated generation may not be bound by conventional art standards, that isn't because the thing that made it was creative or artistic or intended for that result, but rather that the alleged creativity was simply an unintentional byproduct of what is effectively a randomized process based on human-created data and art. Basically, in my opinion, the result is creative, but the process that created it wasn't. If an artist with no training throws paint at a canvas randomly enough times, they'll replicate an abstract masterpiece. That doesn't mean they had any artistic vision, it means that they replicated a technical process enough times to get lucky. And that, in my opinion, is what AI art does when it comes down to capturing a level of creativity that humans cannot. Finally, one more example that many have recently been using to defend AI-generated art as being real is Ada, whose name is actually a really cute little pun because she's named after Ada Lovelace, but her name is spelled AI-duh, and that's just undeniably adorable no matter what you think about the rest of this. Ada is an AI that, with the help of her robotic body and algorithm-based intelligence, is touted as the world's first robot artist. She sees with cameras embedded in her eyes and can recognize humans, animals, still life subjects, and even other pieces of art so that she can depict and replicate them. She can also use uploaded images as reference, just like us, sort of. The most information I could find about how she actually produces her art was, it's an algorithm that determines coordinates for her robot arm to draw on, which is alarmingly little, but given that her creators probably want to maintain the shrouded mystique of their creation and ensure that no one else can steal their process, I can't drag their asses too hard for not advertising how they made her. But the point is, people are using Ada as an example of an AI that can truly and organically replicate human creativity, and I don't think she's any different than Night Cafe or Wamba. Obviously, she was created with different methods and runs differently as well, although I can't substantiate or explain that without more information from her creators. But she's ultimately still an AI using a database of human art to duplicate it. Yes, she's drawing real subjects if needed, and can sit there and talk, and wear artsy clothes and a cute little bob wig, but ultimately, if she was just the algorithm that she is underneath all that, she would be no different than any other AI generative art program. She's using real-life images of her subjects to create that art, which gives the illusion of creativity compared to them. But she's still imitating that creativity by using previous works created by humans. She's just doing it more accurately because she has cameras and they don't. If she didn't look vaguely humanoid, she wouldn't be any different. Especially considering the fact that you can actually submit existing photos to a lot of AI art generators and accomplish the same thing. I think Ada is fascinating, but based on that logic, I agree with a lot of the people commenting on her existence and her work, that the people who created her are the artists, and Ada herself is just the art. That makes her no less impressive, of course, but it does mean that she is not, on her own, capable of creativity or the creation of art independent from human input. So we're now 6 pages into my dumbass script, and we've established what AI art is and whether or not it's real art, potentially. So let's move on to the next point. Why are artists everywhere so scared of it? Well, there are a lot, and I mean a lot of reasons. Let me try to rapid-fire shoot them at you to save time, and then address them all in more detail in the next section. 1. People are concerned that AI art is, or at least will become, indistinguishable from human-created art, and will subsequently replace real artists, both in terms of jobs and other non-professional creative endeavors, even societally. 2. People will claim the AI-generated art that they prompted to creation as their own, despite the fact that the art was technically created by the person that wrote the AI, and then publicly take credit for it or sell it, and no one will be able to tell the difference. 3. It's devaluing human-created art just by existing. 4. It will take away industry jobs from artists because rather than hiring real people, industries will instead choose to use either free or cheaper AI alternatives. And 5, as I mentioned before, it blurs the line between what is a tool for artists to use and what is a replacement for artists' hard work. I know that was like a half-assed baby of a section, but I wanted to explain the issues that people have with them quickly, given how much time I've already taken up. Especially considering that I'm about to address each of those 5 issues in more detail based on whether or not they seem reasonable based on the scientific evidence that we've been provided. That in mind, let's move on to the final section. Should artists be scared of AI art? Is it going to replace us and take our jobs and oversaturate our medium? Let's get into it. First, the claim that AI art is, or at least will be, indistinguishable from human art. The first thing I've seen a lot of people cite is a very misleading article, also linked in the resources of this video, which claims the following. Interestingly, when the AI-generated images were placed beside contemporary human artworks, human evaluators could not tell which images were artificially generated. I looked into this, which the article itself made alarmingly difficult by not including its sources, and found that the exact same group, being Rutgers University, Facebook AI Research, and College of Charleston, published their studies on it, and their studies do not objectively reflect what the article claimed they did. They did 4 experiments with human evaluators. They did 4 experiments with human evaluators and artists, also linked in the description's resources, to determine not only whether or not human subjects could distinguish human art from AI art, but also how much they could aesthetically appreciate that art, comparatively, and whether or not they could personally interpret any meaning from it. And those studies reported some very conflicting results. Yes, the majority of participants were unable to distinguish AI art from human-created art in some of the experiments, but that statistic was still quite close to 50-50, and it was also not that straightforward. The genre was very, very relevant. When it comes to generating environments, really anything without people or living creatures in it, AI can do a fantastic job of replicating it. But as soon as you introduce anything living into that piece, AI immediately seems to struggle to interpret it, and the study reflects that, which is why that article is disingenuous in my opinion, to claim that humans cannot distinguish AI-generated art from human-generated art, because the difficulty becomes inconclusive and difficult to quantify when context isn't considered. Yes, humans struggle to differentiate between abstract abstract AI art and abstract human art. But if it's realistic art, there's no question. People can almost always tell them apart because at the end of the day, without human editing or revision, AI art almost always looks like an uncanny valley version of what it's supposed to be. Yes, it does read exceedingly well as whatever its prompt was anyway, but it's still full of inconsistencies, things that make absolutely no sense, and a litany of evidence that it was not drawn with a vision, but created with an algorithm. So with that in mind, no, I don't think that with AI art generators existing at their current level of quality, artists should fear their work becoming indistinguishable from it. At least in my opinion. Abstract artists and environment artists may be at a higher risk of it based on current studies, but ultimately I still don't think that AI has the skill or creativity to replicate artwork on a refined enough level to be identical to human work. At least not to anyone other than its own discriminator. That said, it's very, very impressive, and it's improved at such a rapid pace already that I'm personally of the belief that it could get to that point eventually. I obviously don't know that for sure, and I am just speculating, but if these programs continue to learn and improve at the rate that they are, I don't think it's at all impossible for them to get to a point where no one can tell their images apart from real artists' work. And to me, that's scary as fuck, and I do think that artists are being perfectly reasonable to fear that, because it opens the door to a plethora of problems for us. And reading all of these studies celebrating when humans can't tell their program's images from artists' work, and knowing that they're only striving to make that more difficult, does not reassure me. For programmers, sure, that's a win. For artists? Well, clearly none of them are thinking about the artists here. Just like in the majority of AI research, in my opinion. They're too busy thinking of all of the things that they could do, and failing to think of whether or not they should. Next, number 2. The concern that people will sell AI-generated art as their own, claim to have created it themselves, and no one, buyers or artists, will be able to tell that they're lying. Once again, this is one that does scare me a little, because I think it's based on a lot of very reasonable, realistic, and possible concerns. Like I said, there are some instances, largely genre-based, in which AI art looks a lot like human art, and it takes a trained eye to tell it apart in some cases. And if people are taking that art and selling it or promoting it to an audience that does not have a trained eye and telling them they drew it with their own 2 very talented hands, I don't think it's unrealistic to imagine that they could actually find some success doing so. That said, I also think it would be a scam with a very short lifespan, because unless that person is actually a skilled artist themselves, there are 2 main hurdles that they would face pretty early on. 1, the moment anyone asks them to draw a person, an animal, or anything very, very specific, be it for the sake of a commission or to prove they're not using a generator, it's going to be very clear based on the quality of the work that their generator produces that they did not, in fact, draw it. They would have to never take commissions and never engage with anyone questioning the originality and validity of their work, and the latter of which would inevitably become impossible if their goal is to grow a large following. 2, the increasingly commonplace knowledge of AI art in the first place, and the ability of more and more people to both recognize and even replicate it. I don't think that I could look at a piece or series of pieces posted and sold online and confidently assert with any degree of certainty that they were 100% made by an AI and not the artist claiming to have made them, much less recognize the networks or styles or prompts and recreate them to prove it. I don't think a lot of people could, but I do think that experts in the field of AI art could, and if these scam artists grew big enough, I think their audience would absolutely end up including more than a small handful of those experts that could and would debunk their scam with relative ease. I mean, here are 3 images generated on Wamba with the mystical style and the prompt abandoned mall. They're all different, yes, but they also all show some very consistent indicators across the board that they are all the same subject matter created with the same style. And I think with enough regenerations, it would eventually create the same original image, or at least something exceptionally close. So if you know the programs well enough and you can guess the prompt the person is using, you can presumably recreate it eventually and prove that they used one of these apps. So yes, ultimately, I think this is a reasonable fear in that it could present a problem, and maybe even already has, but I also think that it's limited, and could only really ever present a relatively small scale problem. It's also worth mentioning that a lot of these AI art generators' creators maintain the copyright for whatever they produce, and many either do not allow the commercial sale of them at all, or charge users for that privilege. Which, yes, means that the user in this case could pay them for that privilege and then have the legal right to sell that work, but it also means something more interesting in this case, which is that the majority of these programs' creators feel confident in their ability to police it, which means that in all likelihood, they too could debunk the claims of any artist claiming to have made these works themselves, if only to protect their copyright. This does become murkier when we add to the equation that artists might take AI-generated art, draw over it, and then claim the finished product to be completely original. And number one, should that be considered a bad thing? Should AI art be considered an artistic tool that artists shouldn't have to disclose that they used? Personally, I think that if an artist used AI as a reference, they shouldn't be obligated to disclose that. But if they literally took an AI-generated piece and drew over it, they should. But that's just my opinion, and I'm sure that will differ amongst others. Regardless of whether or not it's right, though, the larger issue remains. Would people be able to tell? Honestly, I don't know. With photo bashing, all it takes is the ability to recognize the original photo that the artist used, and you can prove that they used photo bashing if they're claiming otherwise. With AI art, if they transformed the original piece enough, it could be borderline impossible to tell, much less empirically prove that the artist didn't create the entire thing themselves. And I can absolutely agree that that's something to be concerned about. Next, number 3, the concern that AI art is devaluing human art just by existing. This one is complicated because that's a very subjective and philosophical stance that can be neither proven nor disproven. Some people feel like AI art is downright offensive because they've spent years upon years studying and perfecting their artwork, and now people with no skill or practice can produce similar things with little to no effort needed. Some people view this advancement as less of an advancement and more of a degradation of the art community, and because this whole fear is based on opinion and not fact, I can't say much either way as to whether or not it has any validity. I can personally see both sides, and while I lean more towards the side that sees it as a promising tool for artists rather than the side that sees it as an offense to art, I do thoroughly understand why people feel this way. So let's move on to number 4, the fear that AI art generators will take industry jobs away from real artists because they're a cheaper and easier alternative that employers would likely prefer to use. And in fairness, I do think this fear has some validity because most industries are already seeing this. AI is writing copy, writing essays, writing blog posts, and stealing jobs from real people with every improvement in its ability to do so. And if industries can use AI to successfully fulfill their art needs, they absolutely will choose to do so, rather than employ a real artist that will take longer and charge more. But as it stands, I don't think they can. I don't think, from an industry perspective, that AI art generators alone can adequately complete any of the responsibilities of any type of current art position, because they can't create finished, polished pieces with consistency or accuracy. If industries want to use AI art to fulfill these human-occupied art positions, they're gonna need to hire trained experts in AI art to tailor the algorithm and specifications to what they want it to create. And even then, they'll still probably need an artist to take that final image and make the many revisions and improvements that will inevitably be needed. The amount of time, effort, and paid employees it would take to use these generators for the jobs that human artists are currently doing would likely end up having the same, if not more, costs as continuing to employ these human artists. So I don't think they'll do it. And if they do, as I said, they're still going to need to pay artists and programmers to make it happen. So those jobs aren't going to go away, they're just going to evolve and change with the addition of this tool, just like they have with the addition of every other tool the art community has seen introduced. Finally, number 5, the fear that it blurs the line between what is a tool for artists to use and what is a replacement for artists' hard work. Like I said before, this is something that comes down to the same argument that we've seen digital artists face time and time again. That the tools that they have at their disposal make the work that they make with them less valid or valuable. I am personally of the belief that so long as an artist is transparent about how they made a piece, that piece is no less artistically authentic or valid. But I know this is going to be a very controversial topic in the future as more artists start using AI-generated art in their work. And I know there are going to be a plethora of other differing opinions on that. And I get it, I understand why, and I'm not trying to say people are wrong for having other opinions on whether or not artists should be using AI-generated art in their own art. I just don't agree. Nonetheless, I understand the fear, and I'm actually quite interested in seeing how people respond to this as it becomes more normalized and acceptable within the community. I'd also be really interested to hear what you guys think about this specifically in the comments, because I feel like you guys would have a lot of diverse opinions and insights into the matter. Anyway, on page 10 of this goddamn script, we're finally at the conclusion. And I gotta say, while I went into the research for this topic with a lot of fears surrounding AI art as a whole, I feel a lot better about it now. I still absolutely have some anxieties about it, and more specifically about how it will evolve and how humans will abuse it dishonestly, but I think that's natural when faced with a brand new thing that we can't fully understand the ramifications of yet. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I went into this seeing AI art as something to fear and worry about, and I'm leaving it seeing it as a promising new tool for artists and a fascinating new medium in and of itself. And I'm pleasantly surprised and honestly really happy about that. I don't think AI art is going to be replacing artists anytime soon, and if that's something you're worried about, I would strongly encourage you to to look into the matter more yourselves, because I think you'll find that it's not nearly as radical, and I mean by definition, like pertaining to an extreme change or overhaul, not like tubular and rad, as sensationalized media would have you believe. I think if there's anything to fear about AI art, in my opinion, it's actually, ironically, the human element. What ill-intentioned human assholes are gonna do with it is likely the biggest problem that we'll face the soonest. Anyway, that's all from me, finally. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please leave a like and subscribe if you did, and thank you for watching. Special thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Joseph Solomon, Unknown Code, and Abyss Reborn, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, This Is Totally My Name, Unity, Cora Fear, and Jamisha Walker for their support. And I'll see you in my next one.